and throttling.
Every rocket, go for deploy.
Thanks, Karen, and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Commercial resupply services mission. Crew-10 began packing for their voyage home about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with the recently arrived Crew-11 team after they docked to the space station a few days ago on August 2nd.
For return operations such as this, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety, the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Now, multiple NTMs, or Notice to Mariners, are issued in advance of and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
And again, we want to stress to the public the need to respect the safety zone, recovering a
recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
And again, we want to stress to the public the need to respect the safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in Dragon, as well as the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. For the safety of our crew and your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch, and we'll bring you the best possible views of our astronauts homecoming today.
Exactly. So
И всем привет, с вами опять я, Space, и вы попали на прямую трансляцию возвращения, а именно уже приводнения пилотируемого космического корабля Crew-10 миссии Crew-10 после полета к Международной станции. После 145 дней стыковки с Международной космической станцией Dragon автономно стыковался от нее в 22:05 по UTC 8 августа. После выполнения серии импульсов для удаления от космической станции Dragon выполнил несколько маневров по снижению орбиты, отделит свой грузовой отсек и вернется в атмосферу Земли для приводнения у побережья Калифорнии примерно через 19 часов. 9 августа в 15:33 по UTC. На борту космического корабля будут находиться астронавты НАСА Энн Макклейн и Николь Айерс, астронавт НАСА JAXA Такуя Ониси, космонавт Роскосмоса Кирилл Песков. Ракета-носитель Falcon 910.4 запустила корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, экипаж Crew-10 к Международной космической станции со стартовой площадки в космическом центре Кеннеди во Флориде 14 марта в 23:03 по UTC. Примерно через 29 часов 16 марта в 4:04 по UTC Dragon автономно состыковался с космической станцией. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию, ранее осуществлял миссии НАСА Crew-3, Crew-5 и Crew-7 к космической станции и обратно. Это был также второй полет первой ступени B1090.2, обеспечивающий эту миссию, которая ранее запускала миссию ССО-3B Empower. После разделения ступеней первой ступени Falcon 9 приземлилась на посадочную площадку НС-1 на станции космических сил на мысе Канаверал. Во время работы на орбитальной лаборатории экипаж проведет новые исследования, направленные на подготовку к исследованию человеком пространства за пределами низкой околоземной орбиты на благо человечества на Земле. Тайвань. Возвращение. Время по UTC 14:39, то есть через 17 минут. Маневр схода с орбиты. Затем 14:58 сброс грузового отсека. 15:02 закрытие носового конуса. 15:29 открытие тормозных парашютов. Через минуту открытие остальных и еще через 3 минуты в 15:33 по UTC, то есть через 1 час 18 минут и 16 секунд, собственно, само приводнение космического корабля. Ну и, собственно, основную часть прямой трансляции, где буду рассказывать все про эту миссию и корабль, я начну уже в, собственно, 14:39 по UTC, когда начнется маневр схода с орбиты, и в целом все этапы уже будут проходить быстро. А пока я оставлю вас здесь.
And he will have completed 148 days in space. Cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. This is also his first flight, similar to Ayers, and he will have completed 148 days in space after this mission. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, Peskov was a co-pilot on the Boeing 757 and 767 aircraft for airlines Nordwind and ECAR. Assigned as a test cosmonaut in 2020, he has additional experience in skydiving and zero-gravity training.
And up next, Dragon will perform a slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and then deorbit burn, and then perform the deorbit burn itself. This deorbit burn is the last time the forward Dracos will ignite, which are the 4 thrusters located on the top of the spacecraft underneath the nose cone. Now, the deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego, California this morning. And we are expecting that deorbit burn to begin in about 15 minutes or so from now.
And once that burn does start, it is expected to last about 17 and a half minutes. So it's a pretty long burn to align for its splashdown later today and get prepared for re-entry. And then after we have that deorbit burn, there will be quite a few events in rapid succession after that. So we'll have the claw separation, the trunk separation before we have entry. And then after that, we will also, or right before entry, actually, we'll have that loss of signal that's expected for about 7 or so minutes. And then we'll reacquire signal, and that's just due to the plasma buildup as they re-enter Earth's atmosphere to conclude their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station. So there on your screen, you're seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, which is actually situated right behind us. So the teams are preparing for the re-entry deorbit operations, and just before we joined you live on today's broadcast, they actually conducted a go, no-go poll for the deorbit burn sequence. And so the teams did poll go to proceed with that deorbit burn. The weather is continuing to look great off of the coast of San Diego, California. Along with the team there in Mission Control, there's teams that are getting ready to actually recover the spacecraft and the crew. So those boats and those teams are already headed out and getting staged at the splashdown location. And once we have splashdown again, that's targeted for 8:33 a.m. Pacific later today, 11:33 a.m. Eastern time. After we have splashdown, there's quite a few events that have to happen to actually get the crew hoisted up onto the recovery boat and then out of the capsule. And that whole process takes about 45 minutes or so before the hatches can be open, and then we can greet the crew back on the boat. So the first steps in that recovery process, we will have 2 fast boats that go out there. They do some initial safety checks and safe the spacecraft. And then after that is done, the recovery boat, it takes about 30 minutes for it to reach the splashdown location. They'll start safing the spacecraft, get it all geared up so that it can then be hoisted onto the recovery ship. And the recovery ship today is the Shannon. So a lot is happening to bring these astronauts home. It's a huge team with a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and if you're following along at the bottom of your screen, you can see the time to splashdown. We're about 1 hour and 7 minutes or so away from the expected splashdown time.
And this is actually the first West Coast splashdown for a NASA crew.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting milestone after all of those operations have been shifted from the East Coast, off the coast of Florida, moving over to California. So now with Crew-10, comprised of Ann McClain,Nicole Ayers, Takуя Ониси, and Kirill Peskov, ready to deorbit and splash down back on planet Earth. Of course, they are heading to one of the 3 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of California, either Los Angeles Oceanside or San Diego. Of course, today they are targeting the site at San Diego. And spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. And for those of you following along, as I just mentioned, today's splashdown does mark the first Dragon recovery of a NASA crew on the West Coast.
Yeah, exactly. After 6 years of successful recovery operations off the East Coast, we've moved all Dragon recovery operations to the West Coast. The From-2 and Axiom-4 private astronaut missions were among the first to splash down off the coast of California after our return to the West Coast. NASA and SpaceX jointly selected our splashdown zones location from one of these 3 sites off the coast of California, and today the primary recovery site is San Diego, as we've been mentioning. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39 hours.
And of course, today's phasing from undocking yesterday is about 17 and a half hours. So they undocked yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific with the splashdown today at 8:33 a.m. So getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. And right there on your screen, you're actually seeing a great live look inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as the crew continues to prepare for those deorbit and entry operations. You're seeing them all suited up, and the closest view on your screen right there is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
Dragon SpaceX deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes.
SpaceX, please, 5 minutes. Crew is ready to return to the atmosphere.
SpaceX copies. We are excited to welcome you home.
And there we just heard some communications between the core or the crew operations resource engineer who is staged here in SpaceX's Mission Control in Hawthorne, between the Crew-10 astronauts currently aboard the Dragon spacecraft, confirming that they are going to begin the deorbit sequence in about 5 minutes from now. So things are really starting to get geared up. And there in that view on your screen, you're seeing an over-the-shoulder look between the pilot and the commander. So again, the pilot isNicole Ayers and the commander is Ann McClain, both NASA astronauts for today's mission. And back to the phasing that we were talking a little bit about. So trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities. Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in, and that we'll need to avoid.
Exactly, and weather is something that we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks from the space station. So for Crew-10's return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, and that's both for the safety of the crew inside of Dragon as well as the recovery teams that are on the water.
And we're also looking at things like wind speeds. We need those to be less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute those recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly the Crew-10 astronauts to California. And once Dragon began flying free yesterday after undocking, there were a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed toward the primary site of San Diego or head to the alternate sites or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we were in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And again, we just had that final go, no-go poll about 20 minutes ago, and that was to commit Dragon to the deorbit burn to set it up for a splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California.
Yeah, and we say this all the time, weather is the one thing that we can't control, and with these crew operations, there's a lot of variables that we have from the time that the Dragon spacecraft leaves the space station all the way through re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, the splashdown zone. So there's a lot of things we have to look out for, but the great part is we've got a lot of experience with this now, this being Crew-10's return home. And we've got the new splashdown zones, which is really cool. We have different options that we can look at to make sure that the weather is always good where we're coming back and bringing the crew back home.
And those weather briefings for Crew-10's undock and splashdown actually began several days ago, basically a couple of days after Crew-11 launched and docked to the International Space Station, which took place on August 2nd. And we initially waved off of a couple of undock opportunities, and then we finally got good weather, which set us up for the undocking yesterday and splashdown today. So the teams are continuously evaluating weather, and weather is just one of those things you can't really control. So, and right now we are just under 1 hour away from splashdown, so things are starting to ramp up as we continue to bring Crew-10 home. And you were mentioning that it's the 10th operational flight for Dragon to the International Space Station. Another milestone this year for NASA is it'll be at the 25th year of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. And in that time, a lot of science and research has been conducted, over 4,000 different research investigations across the life of the International Space Station, and things are continuing to happen. During Crew-10's mission, they completed over 200 science investigations, contributing more than 600 hours of crew time to supporting that science and research aboard the International Space Station.
And speaking of the history of the space station and the crew doing experiments on the orbiting laboratory, we've also got some flight history for Dragon. Development of Dragon for Crew started with the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Dragon was designed from the beginning for flying humans to space, so even from the start, the first Dragon had a window on it, even though we didn't have people on it. Before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure that both Dragon and Falcon 9 were suitable for flying people, and then put both vehicles through thousands of tests to prove their safety. Now, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers. We've been flying 4 with every single NASA crew mission. It's also capable of returning significant amount of cargo back down to Earth, which is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station. Dragon is fully autonomous, which means that it flies itself, but it does have features to fully manual override the vehicle in case of emergency. Dragon is also almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk all the way to the top of the nose cone. Dragon is comprised of 2 main elements: the spacecraft, which is designed to hold the crew and pressurized cargo, and then the unpressurized section, which is known as that trunk.
And we did just hear confirmation that the deorbit slew maneuver was just completed. And again, that maneuver sets up Dragon in the right trajectory and attitude to complete the deorbit burn. So we'll expect that deorbit burn to then start about 5 minutes from now that it is in the correct configuration. And again, once that deorbit burn does start, it'll last about 17.5 minutes. So a relatively long burn for deorbit today. Going back to the Dragon spacecraft and a little bit more, the nose cone at the top of the spacecraft protects the docking system and also the guidance navigation control system. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, which helps SpaceX towards their reusability efforts. Opposite the nose cone is the trunk, and it provides attachment points for Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft and cargo. One half of the trunk is covered in solar panels that provide power to Dragon during flight and while on the International Space Station, and the other half contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. And the trunk has aerodynamic fins, which provide stability in the event of an emergency abort. And in the event of an abort, Dragon is outfitted with 8 Super Draco thrusters, which will power the astronauts to safety, which is applicable during the launch phase of a flight. And the Dragon Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Dragon, giving the crew the ability to quickly separate from Falcon 9 and safely escape the time of launch all the way to orbit, a feature that no other spacecraft in history has possessed. Dragon is also equipped with 16 Draco thrusters used to orient the spacecraft during the mission, including apogee and perigee maneuvers, orbit adjustment, and attitude control. Each Draco thruster is capable of generating 90 pounds of force in the vacuum of space, and we will see those Draco thrusters in action in just a few minutes when it conducts that deorbit burn. And right there on your screen, you're getting a live look inside the Dragon spacecraft. Closest to the camera right there is NASA astronaut and Crew-10 commander Ann McClain, and next to her is NASA astronaut and Crew-10 pilotNicole Ayers.
Yeah, and inside the spacecraft, it's designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. So you could see on your screen the crew members are sitting in the 4 seats, but underneath them is where they can place cargo, which is what they're utilizing the spacecraft for today. But if we needed to, we could place 3 more seats in that cargo area and fit 3 more passengers there. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be customized, or they are customized for any crew member flying on the cargo area and fit 3 more passengers there. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be customized, or they are customized for any crew member flying on board. So.
И я напоминаю, то, что мы продолжаем смотреть прямую трансляцию возвращения пилотируемого космического корабля Crew-10 миссии Crew-10 с Международной космической станции. У нас остается 55 минут до приводнения. Скорость, как мы видим, у нас составляет 26 526 км в час, высота 411 км, время до приводнения 55 минут. Справа у нас также положение Драгона в пространстве, справа снизу, а слева от этого телеметрия работы двигателей. И сейчас у нас уже должен начаться маневр схода с орбиты, для которого будут примерно на 19 минут включены 4 двигателя Draco, которые находятся под люком Crew-10, то есть на самом верху, и расположены против движения. Я напомню то, что после 145 дней стыковки с Международной космической станцией Dragon автономно стыковался от нее вчера в 22:05 по UTC 8 августа. После выполнения серии импульсов для удаления от космической станции Dragon выполнил несколько маневров по снижению орбиты. Отделит свой грузовой отсек и вернется в атмосферу Земли для приводнения побережья Калифорнии примерно через 17 часов сегодня 9 августа в 15:33 по UTC. На борту космического корабля находятся астронавты НАСА Энн Макклейн и Николь Айерс, а также астронавт JAXA из Японии Такуя Ониси и космонавт Роскосмоса Кирилл Песков. Ракета-носитель Falcon 9 запустила корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance и экипаж Crew-10 Международной космической станции со стартовой площадки DC-39А в космическом центре Кеннеди во Флориде 14 марта в 23:03 по UTC. Примерно через 29 часов 16 минут в 4:04 по UTC Dragon автономно состыковался с космической станцией. И как мы видим по телеметрии двигателя, у нас начался маневр для схода с орбиты, который продлится примерно аж 19 минут. Ну, насколько я знаю, там по-разному может быть. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию, ранее осуществлял миссии НАСА Crew-3, Crew-5 и Crew-7 к космической станции и обратно. Это был второй полет первой ступени, обеспечивающий эту миссию, которая ранее запускала миссию с SO3B Power. После рождения ступени первая ступень Falcon 9 приземлилась на посадочную площадку LZ-1 на станции космических сил на мысе Канаверал. Во время работы на орбитальной лаборатории экипаж проводил новые исследования, направленные на подготовку к исследованию человеческого пространства за пределами низкой околоземной орбиты и на благо человечества на Земле. Таймлайн возвращения. Время по UTC в 14:58, то есть через 17 минут у нас уже будет сброс грузового отсека, затем в 15:02 закрытие носового конуса, после чего начнется сам вход в атмосферу. В 15:29 открытие тормозных парашютов через минуту открытия основных парашютов и в 15:33 через 51 минуту 50 секунд само приводнение у берегов Калифорнии. Теперь про сам корабль Crew-10. Dragon 2 — это класс частично многоразовых космических аппаратов, разработанных, изготовленных и эксплуатируемых американской космической компанией SpaceX для полетов к Международной космической станции и частных космических миссий. Космический аппарат, состоящий из многоразовой капсулы и одноразового грузового отсека, имеет два варианта: четырехместный Crew-10 и Cargo-10, являющийся заменой грузового корабля Dragon 1. Космический аппарат запускается с помощью ракеты-носителя Falcon 9 Блок 5, а капсула возвращается на Землю способом приводнения. Стартовый вес составляет 12,5 тонн, сухой вес 7,7 тонн. Грузоподъемность на низкую околоземную орбиту 6 тонн, на Международную космическую станцию 3,3 тонны. Также может вернуть на Землю 2,5 тонны груза и 800 кг утилизировать вместе с грузовым отсеком при сгорании в атмосфере. Вмещает до 4 членов экипажа, хотя по факту может вмещать до 7, но больше 4 никогда не запускали за один раз.
НАСА Такуя Oниси handed over command to Roskosmos cosmonauts, and after departing the International Space Station yesterday,
объем корабля 9,3 кубических метра под давлением и также 37 кубических метров без давления. Имеет шины постоянного тока на 28 и 120 вольт, солнечную батарею мощностью примерно 1,5-2 киловатта и 4 литий-полимерных аккумулятора. На низкой околоземной орбите может прожить 10 дней в автономном в автономном полете полностью и 210 дней пристыкованным к Международной космической капсуле, то есть космической станции. Вот. Сама капсула имеет высоту 4,5 метра, капсула вместе с грузовым отсеком, то есть весь корабль 8,1 метр, максимальный диаметр 4 метра. Все было построено 13 кораблей, из которых 7 пилотируемых. Сейчас эксплуатируется 5 пилотируемых кораблей, и больше построено не будет, и все последующие полеты Crew-10 будут на этих 5 кораблях. Первый полет был 2 марта 2019 года без экипажа, а с экипажем 30 мая 2020 года. Масса топлива составляет 2562 килограмма. Там установится 16 двигателей Dragon с тягой в 400 ньютонов и удалением импульсом 300 секунд, которые работают на 4 окиси азота и монометилгидрозине, а также 8 двигателей Супер Dragon в качестве системы аварийного спасения, работающих на этом же топливе с тягой 71 кН и удельным импульсом 6,9 удельным импульсом 235 секунд, давлением в камере сгорания 6,9 атмосфер. То есть бар. Короче. Ну да. Емкость топливного, емкость топлива, зарезервирована для системы аварийного спасения, составляет 1388 килограмм. Всего эти двигатели могут проработать до 25 секунд. Основная задача Crew-10 — перевозить экипажи на Международную космическую станцию и обратно в рамках программы космических пилотируемых полетов НАСА. Cargo Dragon доставляет же грузы на МКС в рамках контракта с НАСА коммерческие основы снабжения 2, то есть CRS-2. Crew-10 способен работать автономно. SpaceX и НАСА заявляют, что он способен перевозить 7 астронавтов, но обычно курсовой экипаж составляет от 2 до 4 человек и никогда не перевозил больше 4. Так, погодите-ка.
Astronaut and Crew-10 commander Ann McClain will have spent 352 total days in space across 2 flights, having previously spent 204 days in space during expeditions 58 and 59. And then JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi will have spent 263 days in space across his 2 flights to station. And then, of course, this was the first flight for both NASA astronautNicole Ayers and Roskosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, so they will have both logged 148 days in space. And we are now about 7 minutes into the duration of the deorbit burn, about 10 more minutes to go until that is completed. During their stay aboard the International Space Station, both NASA astronauts Ann McClain andNicole Ayers conducted 1 spacewalk outside the orbiting laboratory. That spacewalk totaled 5 hours and 44 minutes. McClain has now conducted 3 spacewalks through the duration of her career for a total of 18 hours and 52 minutes spent outside the International Space Station.
Yeah, Anna, you mentioned seeing all the different vehicles that came to the space station while the crew was on board. If you haven't been following along with some of the crew members, like Nicole Ayers, she's been posting, and she actually posted after Crew 11 arrived at the space station, showed some really cool views of both Dragon Endurance and Dragon Endeavour, both docked to
Так вот, Crew-10 включает в себя интегрированную систему аварийного спасения с толкающей системой, 8 двигателей Супер Драка, которые могут отделить капсулу от ракеты-носителя в случае чрезвычайной ситуации. SpaceX изначально планировала использовать двигатель Супер Драка для посадки Crew-10 на суше, а парашюты и приводнения в океан предполагалось использовать только в случае аварийного запуска. Но в итоге случилось полностью наоборот, короче, грубо говоря. И посадка производится в нормальных полетах только лишь на парашютах на воду. Но в случае отказа парашютной системы недавно было выдано разрешение на использование двигателей Супер Драка для реактивной посадки в океан. Но учитывая, какая у Драгона большая безопасность и то, что ему осталось жить не прям чтобы очень много, я думаю, не более там 5-7 лет, скорее всего, такой сценарий мы никогда не увидим. Вот. Компания SpaceX, стремящаяся к значительному снижению стоимости космических перевозок, спроектировала Dragon 2 с учетом возможности повторного использования, а не утилизации, как это принято в случае с космическими аппаратами. Он состоит из одноразовой капсулы и одноразового грузового отсека. SpaceX и НАСА изначально сертифицировали капсулу для использования в 5 миссиях. По состоянию на март 2024 года они работали над сертификацией. То есть они уже сертифицировали его для использования в 15 миссиях. Поэтому этих 5 кораблей в эксплуатации будет достаточно для поддержки всех пилотируемых полетов на Crew-10. Для максимальной экономической эффективности SpaceX внедрила несколько инновационных конструктивных решений. В системе аварийного спасения Crew-10 используется 8 боковых двигателей Супер Драка, что устраняет необходимость традиционной одноразовой спасательной башни. Более того, место размещения критически важных и дорогостоящих систем жизнеобеспечения, хранения топлива в одноразовом сервисном модуле Dragon 2 интегрирует их в капсулу для повторного использования. Грузовой отсек служит адаптером между капсулой и второй ступенью ракеты Falcon 9, а также включает в себя солнечные панели и радиатор для отвода тепла, а также ребра для обеспечения аэродинамической устойчивости при срабатывании системы аварийного спасения. Dragon 2 интегрирует солнечные батареи непосредственно в структуру грузового отсека, заменяя развертываемые панели. Грузовой отсек также может вмещать неherметичные грузы. Типичная миссия Crew-10 включает 4 астронавтов. Командир, который руководит миссией, несет основную ответственность за управление космическим кораблем. Пилота, который выполняет функции резервного пилота и выполняет функции как командира, так и оператора, и 2 специалистов миссии, которые могут быть поручены особые обязанности в зависимости от миссии. Однако Crew-10 может выполнять миссии при необходимости всего с 2 астронавтами. На Земле экипаж попадает в капсулу через боковой люк. На Crew-10 над 2 центральными креслами, занимаемыми командиром и пилотом, расположена панель управления с 3 экранами. Под креслами находится грузовой отсек, то есть грузовой поддон, точнее, если быть, где можно разместить около 230 килограммов предметов. В потолке капсулы расположен порт Международной стыковочной системы IDSS. Для частных космических миссий, не требующих стыковки с Международной космической станцией, порт IDSS может быть заменен купольным окном диаметром 1,2 метра с панорамным видом, аналогичным куполу на МКС. Кроме того, SpaceX разработала люк Skywalker для миссий, связанных с выходом в открытый космос. Космический корабль может работать в условиях полного вакуума, и экипаж должен носить скафандры, разработанные SpaceX, для защиты от быстрой разгерметизации кабины.
Experience that all has some sort of meaning and inspiration drawn from all areas of their life. Again, that deorbit burn is still underway. We're just under 13 minutes into the...
Космический корабль также разработан так, чтобы... Ой, подождите. Космический корабль также разработан с условием, того, что он может выдержать утечку диаметром до 6,35 мм безопасно. Носовой обтекатель космического корабля защищает стыковочный узел и 4 двигателя, направленные против движения, которые сейчас у нас и работают для схода с орбиты. Носовой обтекатель открывается для выполнения операций в космосе. Топливо и гелий, необходимые для аварийного прекращения полета орбитальных маневров, хранятся в титановых сферических баках с композитно-углеродной оболочкой в основании капсулы в зоне, известной как северный отсек. Для аварийного спасения капсула использует 8 двигателей супердрака, расположенных в 4 кластерах. Каждый двигатель состоит тягу 71 кН. 16 меньших двигателей драка, размещенных вокруг космического корабля, управляют его положением и выполняют орбитальные маневры. Когда капсула возвращается на Землю, тепловой экран ПК-3 защищает капсулу во время входа в атмосферу, выдерживая температуру около 2000 градусов. Dragon 2 использует в общей сложности 6 парашютов, 2 тормозных и 4 основных для торможения после входа в атмосферу перед приводнением. Crew-10 используется как коммерческими, так и государственными заказчиками. Axiom Space запускает коммерческих астронавтов на МКС и в конечном итоге планирует начать запуски на собственную космическую станцию. Полеты НАСА к МКС предполагают полеты 4 астронавтов, а дополнительная полезная нагрузка и объем используется для перевоза грузов под давлением. НАСА также пришлось одобрить новую процедуру загрузки топлива в связи с новым использованием ракете Falcon 9 сверхохлажденного топлива. В отличие от более ранних космических аппаратов НАСА, где топливо полностью загружалось за несколько часов до запуска и до посадки астронавтов, на Falcon 9 топливо загружается непосредственно перед запуском. Чтобы поддерживать температуру жидкого кислорода около минус 207 градусов, а керосина около минус 7 градусов, загрузка топлива начинается за 35 минут до старта. При этом система аварийного спасения активируется, чтобы обеспечить быстрое покидание экипажа ракеты в случае чрезвычайной ситуации во время загрузки топлива. Первый беспилотный испытательный космический корабль Демо-1 был запущен к МКС 2 марта 2019 года. А первый пилотируемый космический корабль был запущен 30 мая 2020 года. Ну и в целом по самому Crew-10 это вся информация. Так, я не читаю. Что происходит? Что происходит? А почему так? Погодите. Вот. Так, ну сейчас у нас уже должен быть закончен маневр схода с орбиты, и сейчас также уже должен быть сброс грузового отсека. Кстати, до недавних миссий они сбрасывали грузовой отсек еще перед сходом с орбиты, и он оставался на орбите еще на некоторое время, после чего неконтролируемого входил в атмосферу и падал куда попало. Сейчас же его отделяют уже после схода с орбиты, и благодаря чему он контролируемо может упасть в закрытые зоны Тихого океана. И есть подтверждение завершения маневра схода с орбиты. вот, собственно, сам космический корабль Dragon. То есть, тут у нас сбоку размещены парашюты, люк для доступа экипажа на Земле. Ясно, так лучше будет. Кластеры двигателей Dragon. 1, 2, 3, 4. По 2 двигателя. И также наверху еще установлено 4 двигателя, размещенных против движения. И где-то там еще также 4 двигателя установлены, потому что всего их 16. Далее. Кластеры двигателей Супер Dragon. Вот также 1, 2, 3, 4 кластера по 2 двигателя. Топливные баки. Порт стандарта Международной стыковочной системы IDSS. Крышка порта. Панель управления. Те самые 3 экрана. Места для астронавтов, собственно. Зона крепления груза, то есть грузовой поддон, система контроля окружающей среды, тепловой экран пика 3 и грузовой отсек также. То есть, ну, солнечные панели, можно сказать, просто наклеены вот таким образом на грузовой отсек. И также, собственно, 4 стабилизатора. Место командира, место пилота и по бокам места 2 специалистов миссии и места для груза. Но по факту вместо мест для груза также можно разместить места для еще 3 членов экипажа. Тест системы аварийного спасения 6 мая 2015 года просто со стартовой площадки. Вот так вот. Полет продлился 99 секунд, после чего корабль успешно приводнился в океан. Также в начале 2020 года был тест системы аварийного спасения в полете. То есть при прохождении максимального аэродинамического сопротивления преднамеренно были отключены все 9 двигателей, и система аварийного спасения делила космический корабль от ракеты, после чего ракету также взорвали системой Flight Termination System, то есть они для этого испытания целый Falcon взорвали. Ну, почти целый, вторая ступень была не настоящая, потому что, ну, она, зачем она там? А вот корабль Dragon после уже возвращения на Землю, вот такой весь обгоревший. Вот тут, кстати, находятся парашюты. А, ну все, дальше уже пошли чисто патчи миссий. Итак, у нас уже должен был произведен сброс грузового отсека. Это что? А, вот. Нам сейчас показывает закрытие носового обтекателя. И далее уже, собственно, начнется сам вход в атмосферу. Хотя, ну, высота у нас еще 343 километра, скорость 26 401 километр в час. И теперь про экипаж миссии Crew-10. Макклейн Энн Шарлотт. Космонавт США, 557-й космонавт мира. Родилась 7 июня 1977 года в штате Вашингтон. В 2002 году получила степень магистра наук по авиационным системам в военной академии Вест-Пойнт. В 2004 году получила степень магистра наук по аэрокосмической технике в университете города Бат в Великобритании. В 2005 году степень министра наук, то есть магистра наук по международной безопасности в Бристольском университете Великобритании. С 2002 года на службе в армии США прошла летную подготовку и получила квалификацию пилота вертолета ОХ-58D Кио Вейрот. принимал участие в боевых действиях в Ираке. На ее счету 216 боевых вылетов. В июне 2013 то есть года была зачислена в отряд астронавтов НАСА. 21 набор. В 2018-2019 году совершила полет в космос в качестве борт-инженера корабля Союз МС-11 продолжительностью 203 дня. Это второй полет в ее карьере. Сейчас, погодите, еще надо кое-какую информацию уточнить. Она у нас летит в качестве командира миссии Crew-10. Далее. В качестве пилота у нас летит Айерс Николь Рэй, космонавт США, 624-й космонавт мира. Родилась 13 декабря 1988 года в Сан-Диего в штате Калифорния. В 2011 году окончила военно-авиационное училище в Колорадо, где получила степень бакалавра по математике. В 2013 году окончила университет Райса в Хьюстоне и получила степень магистра по вычислительной и прикладной математике. В 2014 году завершила летную подготовку и получила звание... Боже, я уже вообще заплетаюсь. В 2014 году получила летную подготовку и получила назначение пилотом Т-33-8А в составе эскадрильи условного противника на авиабазе ВВС Лэнгри в штате Вирджиния. Затем на той же авиабазе стала пилотом-инструктором Т-38А, руководя полетами самолетов условного противника, которые обеспечивали боевую подготовку пилотов F-22 Раптор. На ее счету более 200 часов боевых вылетов над Ираком и Сирией в рамках операции «Непоколебимая решимость». В декабре 2021 года зачислена в отряд астронавтов НАСА 23-го набора. Это первый полет в ее карьере. Далее, первый специалист миссии. Ониси Такуя, космонавт японского аэрокосмического агентства, 545-й космонавт мира. Родился 22 декабря 1975 года в Токио. В 1998 году окончил Токийский университет и получил степень инженера в области авиационного и космического машиностроения. Работал в авиакомпании All Nippon Airways (ANA). После окончания курсов по летной подготовке работал вторым пилотом самолета Boeing 767. С февраля 2009 года в отряде космонавта японского аэрокосмического агентства 5-го набора. В 2016 году совершил полет в космос на корабле Союз МС продолжительностью 115 дней. Это второй полет в его карьере. И далее второй специалист миссии Песков Кирилл Александрович, космонавт Роскосмоса, 625-й космонавт мира. Родился 1 мая 1990 года в городе Кызыл, Тувинская АССР, РСФСР. В 2012 году окончил Ульяновское высшее авиационное училище гражданской авиации по квалификации инженер и специальности летная эксплуатация воздушных судов. Работал вторым пилотом самолета Boeing 757 авиакомпании Nordwind, а затем авиакомпании Икар. В августе 2018 года был зачислен в отряд космонавтов Роскосмоса. Это первый полет в его карьере. И есть подтверждение полного закрытия носового обтекателя. Crew-10 – это, понятное дело, 10-й действующий полет в рамках программы коммерческих экипажей НАСА и 16-й пилотируемый орбитальный полет космического корабля Crew-10. Продолжительность миссии на данный момент составила 147 дней и 15 часов. И у нас остается еще 25 минут 38 секунд до приводнения. Скорость составляет 26 760 км в час, а высота 261 км. И мы ждем начала входа в атмосферу корабля Crew-10 C210.4 Endurance миссии Crew-10.
Arriving and departing visiting vehicles to the space station.
Yeah, and I did say back on land, but I meant back on planet Earth. Once they're out of the spacecraft, then we have the medical teams checking in with the crew, making sure that they're safe, healthy, and then they'll take a helicopter ride back to land to continue their research. They do still have to get checked out, and the mission doesn't completely end right when they land back on Earth. They do still have a little bit more research to complete.
And so right when they exit Dragon, once they're on the recovery boat, again, the recovery boat is the Shannon. We're actually hearing reports that the recovery boat is staged and ready for splashdown and ready to receive the crew. But it will begin with medical evaluations on the boat, and that will progress through exercises that improve mobility, balance, flexibility, aerobic conditioning, strength, endurance, and the body's ability to sense of
Dragon,
position.
SpaceX for final entry briefing. Report when ready to copy.
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to copy.
Dragon, I have no deltas to the previously briefed times. Predicted comm blackout starting at 1520 Zulu and ending at 1527 Zulu. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, we copy. No deltas, and 1520 to 1527 for comm blackout.
That is a good read back, Dragon. The vehicle is healthy, weather is still looking good, and recovery forces are on site. I have one final reminder that the Vehicle 1 Rio LED on your control panel is unavailable. The health of the flight computer and avionics can be monitored on your displays. SpaceX will make expected calls regarding automated chute deployment. Any questions for our team?
SpaceX Dragon, Crew-10 has no questions, and we'll see you all shortly.
Copy on the no questions. And with that, can you please verify that visors are down, tablets are secured, and restraints are tightened no later than 150 kilometers?
Copy, will do.
And we did just hear that briefing between the core, the crew operations resource engineer, and the Crew-10 astronauts aboard Dragon to confirm their readiness for re-entry. We are expecting that communications blackout to take place about 9 minutes from now. Again, it'll last about 7 minutes during that re-entry phase as they start to return to Earth's atmosphere and the gravity associated with it. Again, while they were aboard the International Space Station, of course, they were in the microgravity conditions, so it does have some impacts on the human body. So the returning astronauts will undergo the same pre-flight tests to assess their health status, and these results inform a personalized reconditioning program to restore their physical performance safely and progressively to their pre-flight baseline. Post-flight reconditioning is unique for each astronaut and varies by individual. While most crew members reach their pre-flight fitness baseline within the first 45 days of returning to Earth, it is not uncommon for NASA to extend reconditioning programs to meet an astronaut's specific needs and pace of recovery. So, of course, we have a whole team that will be supporting the astronauts in their recovery. We have folks supporting them as part of NASA's Human Health and Performance Directorate, and there's a whole team specifically focused on strength conditioning and recovery as well. And so during their mission, Crew-10 contributed to more than 200 unique scientific experiments across about 600 hours of science and research and technology demonstrations during their stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. One of those experiments was the rhodium plant life experiment, and this investigation studies how radiation and gravity environments at different orbital altitudes affect plant growth by comparing Crew-10 data with plants flown aboard the Polaris Dawn mission, which flew deeper into space. Studies have shown microgravity affects growth rates, and a better understanding of the mechanisms behind this could improve plant growth techniques in space and on Earth. As mentioned earlier, NASA astronauts Ann McClain andNicole Ayers also conducted a spacewalk to upgrade the International Space Station's power generation systems. The duo installed hardware to support an IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, which are more compact and produce more power than the station's original arrays. The IROSAs were first demonstrated aboard the orbiting laboratory in June 2017, and 8 have been installed to augment the power available for scientific research and other activities. During their mission, Crew-10 also used the International Space Station's Space Automated Bioproduct Laboratory to process samples for a study of microgravity's effects on the protein yield of microalgae. These organisms are highly nutritious, producing amino acids, fatty acids, B vitamins, iron, and fiber. The microalgae could provide sustainable meat and dairy alternatives during long-duration space missions. It also could be used to make biofuels and bioactive compounds and medicines in space and on Earth. And the International Space Station, of course, orbits more than 250 miles above Earth, giving astronauts a unique view.
UTC Dragon. Tablets are secured, restraints are tightened, visors are down, crew is ready for entry.
SpaceX copies. Crew are configured for entry. We are 5 minutes until predicted comm blackout. See you on the other side at 1527 Zulu.
Dragon copies. See you there.
И я так понял, нам было сказано то, что примерно через 5 минут, то есть 15-20 по UTC, у нас при входе в атмосферу начнется плановая потеря связи, которая продлится примерно 7 минут до 15-27 по UTC. Происходит потеря связи из-за того, что космический корабль при входе в атмосферу нагревается аж до примерно 2000 градусов. Понятное дело, возникает плазма, а через плазму сигнал попросту не проходит. Космический корабль Dragon довольно маленький, поэтому он полностью закрывается плазмой, в отличие от огромного 52-метрового старшипа, который плазмой закрывается не полностью, судя по всему, поэтому связь со старшипом есть даже через плазму, но это не старшип, поэтому да, 7 минут придется без связи побыть.
Images of simultaneous lightning bursts at the top of 2 thunderstorms. Scientists used instruments installed on the space station to study lightning and other weather conditions in Earth's upper atmosphere. This research helps protect communication systems and aircraft while improving atmospheric models and weather predictions. And you can see a view of that photo there just on your screen. It's quite beautiful. And we're about 4 minutes away from that communications blackout. Another one of the experiments that the crew contributed to was the Apex 12 investigation, which examines how space radiation affects telomere activity in Thale crest plants. Telomeres, which are repetitive DNA sequences that protect the ends of chromosomes, become shorter each time a cell divides and indicate cell aging. The Apex 12 investigation could clarify the role of telomeres in aging and diseases and help scientists equip plants and other organisms for the stress of long-duration spaceflight. And to round it all out, one of the other experiments they conducted was using a fluorescent microscope known as ELVIS, which captures the motion of microscopic algae and bacteria in 3D, a new capability aboard the International Space Station. The technology could be helpful in various applications in space and on Earth, such as monitoring water quality and detecting potentially infectious organisms. And so we are now about 3 minutes away from that communications blackout, and during that we'll also have confirmation that entry begins. It typically happens about 2 minutes after the initial loss of signal with the spacecraft. Will begin that entry process.
Yeah, the communications blackout is expected at 8:20 and through 8:27. So some other cool photography while on station. Dragon docked to the International Space Station, soars 259 miles above Cambodia in this long-duration photograph revealing star trails, lightning storms, and the city lights of Southeast Asia streaking below. And I love these incredible views that they get, and they get to take these photos that we get to see, even though we don't get to be up there in space with them. Just an incredible view.
And we are now about 2 minutes away from that communications blackout, a little less than 2 minutes. And then after that, the entry will begin. We did hear that the nitrox and suit purge is underway, and they are beginning all of those entry preps. So again, we will stand by as we continue to hear from the team and as we enter this communications blackout in just a few moments.
Yeah, and the suits are there. They're an extension of the spacecraft. They help keep the crew cool, but they also have features just in case there's a depressurization inside of the cabin to help keep the crew safe and healthy during re-entry. It's unlikely to happen, but we have those suits just in case, and the suits are flame resistant. They have 3D printed helmets which are attached. Basically, the IVA intravehicular suits are used for just inside of the spacecraft, so not like the EVA suits that we were showing earlier. They're only used for inside of the spacecraft, and again, they help flow nitrox through the suit, help keep the crew cool, as well as providing them oxygen through these dynamic events as they're coming back down to Earth.
And during Crew-11's launch, we actually noticed Mike Fink has a new IVA suit, so he's debuting a new one. You can't really see too much of the details unless you look real close, but it'll be rolling out real soon.
Yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned from the Polaris Dawn mission with the SpaceX EVA suits that we've translated to the IVA suits. So Mike Fink is the first one to wear the upgraded one, but then Crew-12 is actually expected to wear all of the new designed suits. So that's pretty exciting.
It will be exciting, and we are just moments away from that communications blackout, about 10 seconds until that is underway. And so again, we are expecting that communications blackout to begin here, and it'll last approximately 7 minutes due to plasma formation around the spacecraft. And during this blackout, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control, which you're seeing a live view of Mission Control on your screen, or by the recovery team, which is staged out off the coast of San Diego, California. And no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible.
And as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself, so during re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature Dragon will experience upon re-entry is 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really hot. The blackout period is expected to last about 7 minutes. Again, it has begun at 8:20 a.m. this morning. Again, expected to be complete at 8:27 a.m. And we're not going to hear any comms right now because we know that we have a loss of signal at this moment, but at the expected 8:27 a.m. time frame, we'll start to hear some comms from the core to the crew, checking in to see if they have acquired the...
И у нас уже начинается вход в атмосферу космического корабля Dragon C210.4 миссии Crew-10. Уже должна была случиться потеря связи, которая продлится еще примерно 5 минут. До 15:27 по UTC плановая потеря связи из-за того, что космический корабль при входе в атмосферу нагревается до 2000 градусов, образовывается плазма, и через плазму связь просто не может пробиться. А так у нас остается еще 11 минут и 35 секунд до приводнения. Уже примерно через 7,5 минут в 15:30 по UTC, то есть 15:29 по UTC у нас сначала будет открытие тормозных парашютов, через минуту остальных парашютов, еще через 3 минуты уже само приводнение. А я напомню то, что после 145 дней стыковки с Международной космической станцией Dragon автономно отстыковался дня 20 от нее в 22:05 по UTC вчера, 8 августа. После выполнения серии импульсов для удаления от космической станции Dragon выполнил несколько маневров по снижению орбиты, отделил свой грузовой отсек и вернулся в атмосферу Земли для приводнения побережья Калифорнии в 15:33 по UTC сегодня, 9 августа. На борту космического корабля находится пилот НАСА, то есть командир миссии, астронавт НАСА Энн Макклейн, также пилот астронавт НАСА Николь Айерс и также специалисты миссии, астронавт JAXA из Японии Такуя Ониси и космонавт Роскосмоса Кирилл Песков. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию ранее, Ой, подождите, не то, блин. Что-то сегодня стримы мне вообще как-то очень тяжело даются, блин. Наверное, сказывается то, что я вчера только вернулся из почти 5-дневной поездки, блин. Так вот, ракета-носитель Falcon 10.90.2 запустила корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance и экипаж Crew-10 Международной космической станции со стартовой площадки LC-39 в космическом центре Кеннеди во Флориде 14 марта в 23:03 по UTC. Примерно через 29 часов 16 минут в 4:04 по UTC Dragon автономно состыковался с космической станцией. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию ранее, осуществлял миссии НАСА Crew-3, Crew-5 и Crew-7 космической станции и обратно. Это был второй полет первой ступени Falcon 9 B1090.2, обеспечивающего эту миссию, которая ранее запустила миссию СС от Power. После рождения ступени первой ступени Falcon 9 приземлилась на посадочную площадку LZ-1 на станции космических сил на мысе Канаверал. Во время работы на орбитальной лаборатории экипаж проводил новые исследования, направленные на подготовку к исследованию человеком пространства за пределами низкой наземной орбиты и на благо человечества на Земле. У нас остается 8 минут 35 секунд до приводнения. Мы ждем возобновления связи, которое произойдет примерно через 2 минуты. Как мы видим, да, телеметрия у нас пропала полностью. А пока про следующие космические запуски и события. Завтра 10 августа у нас запланированы такие запуски. Сначала Falcon 9 с миссией Starlink Group 17.4 в стартовое окно с 3:43 по UTC по 6:05 по UTC. Также запуск ракеты Falcon 9 с миссией Project Kuiper Falcon 02, который был запланирован еще на сегодня, но его перенесли на отметке 28 секунд до запуска из-за плохой погоды. Так вот, он запланирован теперь на завтра в стартовое окно с 12:57 по 13:24 по UTC. Его я попытаюсь постримить, если получится. Но и на завтра погоды всего лишь 50% go for launch, но все равно лучше. Сегодня было всего лишь 35. Далее, 12 августа. Falcon 9 с миссией Starlink Group 10.20 в стартовое окно с 11:32 по 15:32 по UTC. Затем 13 августа будет 3 интересных запуска подряд, которые я обязательно постримлю. Первый запуск ракеты Vulcan VC4S. То есть третий запуск ракеты Vulcan с миссией SSF-106 NTC-3 и другие в стартовое окно от 23:59 еще 12 августа до 2:04 13 августа. Также запуск ракеты Ariane 6 версии 62. Также третий запуск ракеты Ariane 6 с миссией METOP SGA-1. Запуск запланирован на 00:37 по UTC. И также запуск ракеты Long March 5B с разгонным блоком YZ-2 с миссией SatNet Real в стартовое окно с 6:45 по 7:01 по UTC. Эти 3 запуска я обязательно постримлю. И у нас есть возобновление телеметрии с пилотируемым космическим кораблем Crew Dragon миссии Crew-10. Высота составляет 33,5 км, скорость стремительно падает и составляет 4200 км в час. И уже примерно через 1-2 минуты должно быть открытие вытяжных парашютов. Двух вытяжных парашютов на высоте примерно 5,5 км будет их открытие. Далее по запускам, также 13-го запуска, еще запуск Falcon 9 с миссии Starting Group 17.5, куда же без него, в стартовое окно с 15:44 по 19:44 по UTC. Затем 15 августа, опять-таки Starting Group 10.11, стартовое окно 11:57, 15:57 по UTC. 17 августа, Starting Group 17.6, стартовое окно 15:44, 19:44 по UTC. О, и вот наконец-то нам показывают астронавтов миссии Crew-10. Собственно, вот командир миссии, пилот и по бокам двое специалистов миссии. Затем 20 августа запланирован запуск ракеты Союз-2.1 с космическим аппаратом Бион М номер 2 в 20:13 по московскому времени. Затем 21 августа в 7:57 по UTC запуск ракеты Falcon 9 с грузовым космическим кораблем Cargo Dragon 2 миссии CRS-33. Также 21 августа, пока что в неизвестное время, запланирован запуск ракеты Falcon 9 с космопланом Boeing X-37B миссию SSF-36 OTV-8. 23 августа Starting Group 17.7 в стартовое окно с 2:05 по 6:05 по UTC, но он, скорее всего, будет отменен если... Так, нет, сейчас подождите, сейчас уже должно быть открытие вытяжных парашютов.
We do have confirmation that the drogue deploy is underway.
И есть открытие двух вытяжных
Visual on
парашютов.
2 healthy drogues.
И сейчас должно также быть открытие 4 основных парашютов.
And a great live view from the spacecraft itself, seeing those 2 healthy drogues deployed.
And the spacecraft has now slowed down to less than 200 kilometers per hour, and it is now just over 2 kilometers above the water as it prepares for splashdown, and we should have that main parachute deploy in just a few moments to continue slowing the spacecraft down to about 16 miles per hour at the
И есть
time of
открытие
splashdown.
4 основных парашютов пилотируемого космического корабля Dragon C210.4 Endurance миссии Crew-10. И высота у нас составляет уже всего лишь 1,1 км, скорость упала до 28 км в час. И до применения остается менее 2,5 минут. Так вот, далее по запускам. На 23 августа у нас, то есть на 22 августа, если брать по местному времени, наконец-то запланирован запуск 10-го испытательного полета Starship с корабля Ship-37 и ускорителя Booster 16 в стартовое окно с 23:33 по UTC по 1:34 по UTC в ночь с 22 на 23 августа. Ну и, собственно, ожидаем приводнения миссии Crew-10.
Morning and a clear view, watching as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew-10 is...
Basic Dragon, 600 meters. Basic Dragon, 600 meters.
I copy 600 meters.
We're just 600 meters away from splashdown.
And just over a minute away from that targeted splashdown time, again expected around 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Now about 500 meters away from the surface of the water. And slowed down to about 35 kilometers per hour. Again, it'll continue to slow down.
SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. Splashdown. Brace for splashdown.
SpaceX copies 400 meters and crew are braced for splashdown.
We just saw an incredible view there of the Dragon as it re-entered under some cloud cover. And we should be regaining some of those live views from the recovery zone momentarily as it gets resituated to capture the return. The spacecraft is now about 200 meters above the ocean, and it has slowed down to about 30 kilometers per hour. Again, it will continue to slow down until about 16 kilometers per hour. And there we can see another live look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew-10 back home to Earth following their 5-month mission, moments away from splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, splashdown. SpaceX Dragon, happy splashdown.
Так, судя по всему, эти гении решили нам показывать не приводнение корабля, а приводнение вытяжных парашютов. Но у нас есть подтверждение приводнения космического корабля Crew Dragon миссии Crew-10. Dragon C210.4 Endurance вернулся на Землю после уже 4-го полета на Международную космическую станцию. Ну вот, наконец-то Dragon показали. Капец, у них до сих пор что ли темно там. Уже ж 7 утра у них, по-моему. Какое темно может быть? Почему они показывают в этом спектре, блин, непонятно. До сих пор что ли? А я напомню то, что мы смотрим прямую трансляцию приведения космического корабля Crew Dragon миссии Crew-10 после 145 дней стыковки с Международной космической станцией. Dragon автономно стыковался от нее вчера, 8 августа, в 22:05 по UTC. После выполнения серии импульсов для удаления от космической станции он выполнил несколько маневров по снижению орбиты, отделил свой грузовой отсек и вернулся в атмосферу Земли сегодня в 15:33 по UTC. Приводнился возле побережья Калифорнии. В Тихом океане на борту космического корабля находятся астронавты НАСА, а именно командир миссии Энн Макклейн, пилот Николь Айерс, а также специалисты миссии, астронавт JAXA из Японии Такуя Ониси и космонавт Роскосмоса Кирилл Песков. Ракета-носитель Falcon 9 BDC-90.2 запустила корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance и экипаж Crew-10 к Международной космической станции со стартовой площадки LC-39 в космическом центре Кеннеди во Флориде 14 марта в 23:03 по UTC. Стыковка была произведена примерно через 29 часов 16 минут в 4:04 по UTC 16 марта. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию, ранее осуществлял миссии НАСА Crew-3, Crew-5 и Crew-7. Этот полет стал для него уже 4-м полетом на космическую станцию. Это также был второй полет первой ступени Falcon 9 BDC-90.2, который ранее запускал миссию SES-O3 Power, которая после рождения ступени приземлилась на посадочную площадку LC-1 на станции космических сил на мысе Канаверал. Во время работы на орбитальной лаборатории экипаж проводил новые исследования, направленные на подготовку к исследованию человеком пространства за пределами низкой околоземной орбиты и наблюдать человечество на Земле. И сейчас, собственно, после приводнения космический корабль будут поднимать на корабль, как бы это странно ни звучало, чтобы, собственно, открыть его и вытащить членов экипажа из него. Именно вытащи, потому что после полугода полета ходить они не могут от слова совсем. Ну и, собственно, ожидаем. Но это может быть очень долго и скучно, поэтому, да. Я опять вас просто оставлю здесь, потому что комментировать особо нечего.
The coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, just about 5 minutes ago.
Approximately 17 and a half hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, to place itself on a trajectory towards San Diego, California. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. And we'll now follow the final part of Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill's journey as Dragon is lifted out of the water and placed onto the recovery boat.
And upon detection of landing, Dragon does automatically release the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. And then Dragon automatically safes any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts do remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperate inside the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate.
Now, SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which have moved quickly to the splashdown point, and you can see one of them there on your screen next to the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upon upwind of the spacecraft. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection of the spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of hypergolic propellant vapors, ensuring that it's safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon. Now, once Dragon is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first. And we'll see a team member on a jet ski soon helping to gather up the detached parachutes.
And it does take about 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. And then once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon, today. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft so they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. It will take less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After those initial medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter, and if no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will then board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston and make their way home. And so just about 7 minutes ago, Dragon Endurance did return home, and NASA astronauts Ann McClain,Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour journey from space.
SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now currently making their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting.
Dragon, SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach the capsule. Expect fast boats alongside in about 1 minute.
Copy 1 minute. Copy you guys are on it. Thanks. You guys are on it. Thanks.
And so we did just hear confirmation that the recovery boats or the fast boats have been given the confirmation to proceed. So those recovery steps will soon commence. Again, it takes about 10 minutes for all those safety checks to be completed. And we actually have a team member out on the recovery boat who we will be hearing from momentarily to get her perspective. And so joining us from the recovery vessel is NASA Public Affairs Officer Reagan Scharfetter, who had a first-hand view of the crew returning and splashing down. Reagan, can you hear us? And how was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hey there, Anna and Jesse. How do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, seeing splashdown firsthand was a moment I and I assume others on board will play back for the rest of time. We were stationed within 1.5 nautical miles from the splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego and had fairly decent visuals from the Shannon recovery vessel. The cloud ceiling is actually higher than originally forecasted at around 1,100 feet, which gave us a little more room to see the Dragon spacecraft coming in on this misty morning. Even with these cloudy skies, though, we were able to witness the 4 white and orange main parachutes before Endurance descended down into the Pacific Ocean, and now we're just eagerly awaiting our Crew-10 members to join us on the ship very soon.
That's very exciting, Reagan. I'm so happy that you have that firsthand perspective. You mentioned the cloud cover a little bit, but overall, how have the landing conditions been from your perspective?
The landing conditions were nominal this morning and within limits in regard to sea state, winds, and cloud ceiling. There was also some excitement earlier on board when we spotted not only whales, but also a pot of dolphins and a shark out on our starboard side. Currently, it's about 66 degrees out with 5-mile-per-hour winds and what has been described as a pretty mild sea for the ship, but what could be more of a rougher ride for the capsule itself. Irregardless, after spending 146 days aboard the International Space Station, I think this crew is going to be more than thrilled with this fun reintroduction to the planet.
We're going to have to keep our eyes peeled for some whales over here, I guess. But can you tell us a little bit about the recovery journey to get to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. One standout part of this recovery is that Crew-10 actually marked the first crewed
Dragon,
NASA mission.
SpaceX, hypergol sweeps, and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. We have flight surgeons standing by. Please confirm crew are ready for PMC.
Copy, 5 minutes. Copy, 5 minutes. Alert, cruise.
So we did just hear some communication there, about 25 minutes to
Copy,
lift.
Dragon. The next call you hear will be from flight surgeon on Dragon to ground private.
Dragon copies. Copies.
And you can see that view there of the 2 fast boats and that rigging underway. Reagan, do we still have you? Do you want to continue on about the recovery journey to get to this point?
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying, one standout part of this recovery is that Crew-10 marks the first crewed NASA mission to return to the Pacific Ocean since 1975. That's 50 years ago when the Apollo-Soyuz mission ended. The landing zone shift from the Gulf and Atlantic sites shows the commercial crew program's continued flexibility and adaptations to mission needs, but this doesn't go without paying attention to new perspective challenges like marine layer and visibility issues, as well as some rougher sea states, which we are getting a slight taste of today. These are also conditions the Artemis II recovery team will be tracking ahead of their mission next year, which too will conclude with a splashdown off the Pacific coast. For today's operations, though, we started the morning by flying a series of helicopters out to the vessel. The recovery director and crew support teams were on the first flight out to help get the ship ready. And about 2 hours before splashdown, 2 fast boats and a jet ski were then placed into the water. I was on the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship
Dragon,
about 90.
SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud and clear. We have you loud and clear.
Copy, Dragon. I have you loud and clear with a slight echo. For your awareness, we're going to step into transitioning the forward link now. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Dragon copies. Dragon copies.
And we did just hear those comm checks, and we have heard that the crew has reported that they're feeling well following their splashdown. Reagan, go ahead and tell us about your helicopter ride out to the recovery zone.
Yes, as I was saying, I was on the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship about 90 minutes before splash. And I just have to say, I have never seen an execution quite like this before. Teams have been working nonstop across various disciplines all week in lockstep with each other, just making sure that every detail was in place for Crew-10's successful return.
That's incredible, Reagan. So what's next for retrieving the crew?
Up next Endurance will be hoisted onto the vessel and pulled toward the egress platform on Dragon Nest at the aft end of the ship. Safety checks will then be performed before opening the side hatch to ensure there are no hypergolic vapors present. And once confirmed, NASA and SpaceX medical personnel will assist the crew out of the capsule one by one. Once the crew exits the capsule, they'll undergo medical evaluations in the med bay, and soon after that, they'll board the first helicopter out, head to the airport, and then take a NASA plane back to Houston to begin their post-flight activities. I will say, as a first-timer out here, it's important to mention that seeing a spacecraft-shaped comet shoot down from the sky has just been an incredible joy to experience. And I know I can speak for the rest of the ship when I say that it's even more exciting to be able to welcome home Ann, Nicole, Takua, and Kirill. In the meantime,
broadcast towards the end of Reagan's comments, she did actually mention the Dragon nest where Dragon will be hoisted up onto, and you can see a little bit of a live view there on the edge of your screen. So that is where Dragon will lift up onto once it's ready, and then once it's safely there, we'll actually move inward a little bit, and then from there the hatches will be opened and the crew will be extracted out. During the extraction of the crew, they are typically assisted, and that's completely normal. And that's completely normal during these operations. Again, they have been in the microgravity environment for about 5 months, and so some reconditioning needs to take place to reacclimate themselves to Earth's gravity.
And this is a view from the recovery vessel, but we did see the recovery teams preparing.
Dragon, SpaceX, forward link transition complete, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you clear with a slight echo.
Dragon, we have you the same without an echo.
Sounds like they are trying to.
Copy. Echo but readable.
Trying to update the comms link, as we did hear an echo from the Crew-10 crew as they were talking to the core. But now it sounds like we may have reversed the echo, where we're not hearing it any longer, but the crew is now hearing the core on an echo. So I'm sure they're going to continue to troubleshoot that to get some clear comms during these last few moments of recovery. Currently, Crew-10 is still inside of Dragon, still in the ocean, waiting to be lifted onto the recovery ship. The recovery team is rigging up the spacecraft in preparation for that lift, basically adding the straps necessary to lift Dragon out of the water, which will be lifted with the hydraulic lift on the recovery ship, and then into that nest that we were seeing earlier. Then they'll translate to that deck that we saw on the recovery vessel. And then finally, the hatch will open. They'll take their first breath of fresh air in a little under 5 months.
And so you are seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne. As soon as we have good views of the recovery again, we will of course share those with you. Sometimes the cameras and the equipment out there just has to be restationed to get some better views during these recovery operations. So again, the crew did splash down aboard the Dragon Endurance spacecraft at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, a little under 20 minutes ago. And so it does take about 30 minutes until the recovery ship fully arrives out there, and that's also around the time that that rigging of the Dragon capsule will be complete. So a little bit after 9 a.m. we should see that rigging fully completed, the recovery vessel right up next to Dragon and being prepared for that hoist. And you can see that live look there of the recovery ship, the Shannon, which has made its way out to the splashdown zone, and you can see Dragon Endurance spacecraft, which currently has the Crew-10 astronauts seated inside. as they get closer and closer to each other to prepare for that lift onto the recovery ship. And again, this splashdown took place off the coast of San Diego, California today. It was the first West Coast splashdown and recovery of a NASA crew, and the last crewed recovery for a SpaceX mission was Axiom Mission 4 just last month.
And again, we are in the Pacific Ocean at this moment. But the last NASA crew, Crew-10, splashed down off the coast of Florida. They had some dolphins to greet them. It sounds like from Reagan's point of view, they saw some whales, some dolphins, even a shark out there. So we got a lot of sea members waiting for this crew to come back home.
Giving them a warm greeting back to Earth with the animals that are only here.
Dragon, SpaceX, rigging complete, approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
SpaceX Dragon came in broken and it did not catch the second half. Understand rigging is complete.
5 minutes until capsule lift.
Copy, 5 minutes.
And for those of you who are just joining us, the Crew-10 members comprise of NASA astronauts Ann McClain andNicole Ayers, alongside JAXA astronaut Takуя Ониси and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, safely splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California about 20 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern Time. And right now you are seeing a live look from the recovery boat, the Shannon, which is preparing to hoist Dragon up onto the Dragon nest, which you are seeing there on your screen. And then from there, they will continue preparation to open the hatch and welcome the Crew-10 crew back onto Earth as they take their first breath of fresh air after 5 months aboard the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73.
We did hear a call that lift is under 5 minutes away, and you could see the recovery teams as they're rigging up the spacecraft, getting ready to hoist it up. And you could see a recovery team member standing on the outside of the Dragon spacecraft, helping to prepare the vehicle for that lift.
And as part of the preparation for the lift, one of those recovery team members, likely the one we're seeing on the spacecraft right now, will climb to the top of the spacecraft so that they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So recovering a spacecraft is a very complex operation. And so there's a lot of teams involved. And of course, since it is splashing down in the ocean, they do issue some notices to mariners to make sure that the area is clear. And we work closely with the United States Coast Guard to ensure the safety of not only the recovery team and the crew, but as well as other people that may be out in the Pacific Ocean today.
Yeah, we've made sure that this area is clear for these final operations, as it does take some time after splashdown to prepare the spacecraft, safe the spacecraft, prepare the spacecraft for lifting onto the vehicle, making sure that the recovery teams are safe. Once they lift the spacecraft onto the deck or into that, what we call the Dragon's nest on the recovery ship, they'll also continue to do some safety checks to make sure that the thrusters on the Dragon spacecraft don't have any more gases leaking from them, and then they'll cover those up. Again, continuing to prioritize safety first as we get the Crew-10 crew ready to exit or egress the Dragon spacecraft.
And so that whole recovery process from splashdown to getting the crew out of the capsule takes less than an hour. So we should expect to see the crew and their smiling faces in hopefully about 30 minutes or less from now. Again, they splashed down a little less than 30 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. This followed a 17.5-hour phasing journey following their departure and undocking from the International Space Station yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. And so you can see that line that is connected from the recovery ship onto Dragon as it tugs its way in, and that recovery crew member making its way to the top of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, that recovery member is up there as part of the preparation for the lifting of the spacecraft onto the recovery vessel. They are there so that they can physically attach.
Brace for capsule lift.
I still think that's one of the best jobs.
Copy. Cruise brace.
So they have physically attached those hoist rings and connected the lifting lines, and now they are preparing to lift the Dragon Endurance spacecraft onto the Shannon recovery boat momentarily. And you did just see that live look of the recovery member as he jumped off of the spacecraft and into the Pacific Ocean and is now back on one of the fast boats. And those fast boats were some of the initial recovery ships or recovery vehicles out at the splashdown location.
And again, we heard those comms to the crew, notifying them to prepare for the lift. Again, they can't see very much outside of the spacecraft, so knowing what operations are happening helps them understand what those moves that they're feeling are, so they know what to expect.
And once they begin that lift, it takes less than 10 minutes or so for it to be completed. And so it'll be safely inside that basket there at the end of the ship where the dragon's egg, or dragon's nest is what it's known as. And then about 10 minutes or so from then, it'll be ready for hatch open. And you do see that lift is now underway as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft makes its way onto the recovery ship, the Shannon, that is staged off the coast of San Diego, California, following splashdown of the Dragon Endurance and the Crew-10 astronauts currently aboard.
And as this is happening, the crew is still strapped in to their seats with the 5-point harnesses, and they'll remain strapped in through the translation of the spacecraft to the deck and until the medical officer actually greets them. Then they will begin to unbuckle themselves and start egressing the spacecraft.
And so Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft just happened.
Stand by for translation to egress platform.
Dragon copies.
And so that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now complete. You can see it there on your screen safely in the nest on the recovery ship. And so that translation to bring it forward and closer into the ship to then prepare to open the hatches will begin momentarily. You can see some of the crew member or the recovery members there doing their final inspections and safety checks of the spacecraft before they begin that translation. And then once that translation of the spacecraft is complete on the SpaceX recovery ship, the hatches will be opened. And we do expect that to take place probably in about 10 to 15 minutes from now. And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one to check in on Ann McClain, Nikol Ayers, Takuya Onissi, and Kirill Peskov and see if they are ready for egress or getting out of the spacecraft. And while Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the space station, the astronauts will actually egress or exit from Dragon's side hatch, pending capsule orientation in the water. Of course, we did see that it splashed down in orientation 1, so the nose cone was facing up, which is the preferred orientation. And so before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. And then once the hatch is open, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their spacecraft at the start of their journey last March. Again, they lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th of this year.
And it's important to note that Ann, Nikol, Takuya, and Kirill will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, as returning to a gravity environment can wreak havoc with our vestibular system, responsible for maintaining balance and motion. Safety is our #1 priority and with this operation, so you'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft one by one and assisted the few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat.
And if you've ever watched crews return on a Soyuz, 2 of our crew members today had actually previously flown on a Soyuz, Ann McClain and Takuya Onissi. This is the same process as when astronauts are carried from the Soyuz capsule to waiting chairs on the steppe of Kazakhstan and then carried to a waiting medical tent. This is also the period where any time-critical cargo can be recovered from the spacecraft, with the remainder waiting until the ship is back in port.
Once the ship and spacecraft return to shore, the recovery team will perform additional inspections before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing.
And so we mentioned earlier all of the science and research that Crew-10 conducted during their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station. So in addition to some of the physical and biological science experiments that they conduct, they too themselves are human research subjects. So a lot of teams work to gather samples from the crew throughout their mission to see how the microgravity environment of space actually impacts the human body. So NASA does have the Human Research Program, which is responsible for a lot of that science and investigation. But of course, there's also researchers outside of NASA that use the microgravity environment aboard the International Space Station to conduct their science and research. We do have the International Space Station National Laboratory that helps to facilitate a lot of that other research as well.
And those research experiments, especially with the human body, are extremely important, especially for, we call these long-duration missions 5 to 6 months long, but if we're going to be going to the moon, planets like Mars, we're going to need to stay a lot longer, and we're going to need to know how to keep the human body healthy throughout that time. What happens in these microgravity environments, and how can we better prepare the humans for going on these even longer duration missions.
So the International Space Station does serve as sort of a testing and proving ground for NASA's future Artemis missions to the moon and then on to Mars. Of course, we can't necessarily do all science and research in the microgravity environment due to various factors. So teams on the ground also do what are known as analog research experiments. Also, a lot of that is based out of our Human Research Program. So one of those known as the Human Exploration Research Analog, or
И я напоминаю то, что мы смотрим прямую трансляцию приводнения пилотируемого космического корабля Dragon C210.4 миссии Crew-10 после возвращения с Международной космической станции. И у нас уже, собственно, подняли космический корабль на корабль, открыли люки, уже вытащили первого члена экипажа. И сейчас, собственно, буду вытаскивать и всех следующих. Завершена миссия Crew-10 9 августа 2025 года в 15:33 по UTC. Возвращаемый парад корабля Endurance с космонавтами Энн Макклейн. Это командир миссии от НАСА. Также пилотом Николь Айерс, также от НАСА. Первым специалистом миссии от японского космического агентства Такуя Ониси и Кириллом Альбертовичем Песковым. Это второй специалист миссии из Роскосмоса. Они были получены при Университетском океане у берегов Калифорнии. Продолжительность полета составила 145 суток, 16,5 часов.
Onishi and Roskosmosa Kirill Peskov. And the second Crew-10 crew member has successfully egressed the capsule, and that is NASA astronautNicole Ayers. So both NASA astronauts Ann McClain and Nicole Ayers have successfully egressed or exited the capsule. Ann McClain served as the Crew-10 commander.
Ну и вот у нас вытащили уже второго астронавта, и первого у нас вытаскивали, понятное дело, командира, а именно Энн Макклейн от НАСА. Теперь вытащили и пилота Николь Айерс также от НАСА. И далее идут специалисты миссии от JAXA и Роскосмоса.
You did just see them removing 2 additional foot restraints, likely preparing to egress the final 2 Crew-10 crew members.
If you're just now joining us, NASA astronauts Ann McClain and Nicole Ayers have already egressed or exited the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, we are waiting for the final 2 Crew-10 members to exit. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roskosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are still inside of the Dragon spacecraft.
And so the crew did complete a 148-day mission, with 146 of those days docked to the International Space Station. During that time, they completed more than 2,300 orbits around the Earth, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. And NASA astronaut Ann McClain, who was the first to exit the spacecraft, has now totaled 352 total days in space. This was her second space flight. Her previous mission was aboard a Soyuz spacecraft. And then this was the first space flight for NASA astronautNicole Ayers, who was the second to exit the spacecraft. So she now has 148 days in space. And we do now see JAXA astronaut Takуя Ониси has exited the spacecraft. And this was also the second space flight for Onissi. So across his two missions, he has now totaled 263 days in space. So we are now just standing by for the final crew member of Crew-10 to and the missions he And we do now see JAXA astronaut.
И у нас вытащили уже третьего астронавта миссии Crew-10. Это у нас астронавт JAXA, японского аэрокосмического агентства, специалист миссии Такуя Ониси. И сейчас у нас будет вытаскивать последнего четвертого члена экипажа, космонавта Роскосмоса Кирилла Пескова. А я напоминаю, то, что мы смотрели прямую трансляцию приводнения пилотируемого космического корабля Crew-10 миссии Crew-10, который после 145 дней стыковки с Международной космической станцией автономно стыковался днем вчера, 8 августа в 22:05 по UTC, после выполнения серии импульсов для удаления от космической станции Dragon, выполнил несколько маневров по снижению орбиты, отделил свои грузовые отсеки, вернулся в атмосферу Земли для приводнения у побережья Калифорнии в Тихом океане сегодня, 9 августа в 15:33 по UTC. На борту космического корабля находились астронавты, командир от НАСА Энн Макклейн, пилот НАСА Николь Айерс, астронавт JAXA Такуя Ониси, то есть специалист миссии. Вот у нас сейчас достает последнего четвертого члена экипажа, космонавта Роскосмоса Кирилла Пескова, который был вторым специалистом миссии. Ракета-носитель Falcon 9B1090.2 запустила корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, экипаж Crew-10 к Международной космической станции со стартовой площадки LC-39 в космическом центре Кеннеди во Флориде 14 марта в 23:03 по EDC. Примерно через 29 часов 16 марта в 4:04 по UTC Dragon автономно состыковался с космической станцией. Космический корабль Dragon C210.4 Endurance, обеспечивающий эту миссию, ранее осуществлял миссии НАСА Crew-3, Crew-5 и Crew-7. И этот 10-й полет был для него, миссия Crew-10 была для него уже 4-м полетом на МКС. И обратно. Это был также второй полет первой ступени B1090.2, которая ранее запускала миссию СС от Empower. После разделения ступеней она приземлилась на посадочную площадку LZ-1 на станции космических сил на мысе Канаверал. Во время работы на орбитальной лаборатории экипаж проводил новые исследования, направленные на подготовку к исследованию человеком пространства за пределами низкокоземной орбиты и на благо человечества на Земле. И на этом все. Всем спасибо за просмотр и всем пока.
Roll-out solar array that will arrive on a future SpaceX commercial resupply services mission. With their full-duration mission coming to an end, the crew began packing up their personal items for their return to Earth about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with Crew-11 teams as they arrived to the space station a few days ago.
Their journey home began when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 3:15 p.m. Pacific or 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, August 8th. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn, to line up their orbit, and Nikol, Takuya, and Kirill rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning. Dragon performed an approximately 17.5-minute long deorbit burn to send Dragon on a path home. That burn ended at 7:57 a.m. Pacific Time, 10:57 a.m. Eastern, and this was followed by trunk separation and Dragon's final on-orbit maneuver, closing of the nose cone at 8:02 a.m. Pacific Time, 11:02 a.m. Eastern. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific Time or 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in and prepare Dragon Endurance for its lift on the recovery vessel. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Anne, Nikol, Takuya, and Kirill make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities safe and sound.
And next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore while they're transferred to aircraft that will take them home. The astronauts will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston. They'll then be reunited with their families to bring an end to this mission. It's been an honor and privilege to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
And return today marks the end of the direct handover we executed after successfully launching the Crew-11 mission to the space station just last week on Friday, August 1st. Thank you, as always, for joining us for this morning's coverage of the splashdown of Crew-10. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA online and on social media for updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station.
And we'll continue to share the progress of Ann McClain,Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov on social media as they travel back home. We will also have a post-splashdown media teleconference coming up at approximately 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, where leadership will share a final update as we conclude this successful mission. And you can tune in live on NASA's YouTube page and through nasa.gov. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, thank you for joining us and welcome home, Crew-10.